Rev up your engines! This is a car that I would never buy used, but I would buy new, a Toyota Prius. Now they've been making Toyota Priuses for 23 years now. They've sold over 6.1 million of these Prius hybrids so far. And if you know anything about Toyota, they generally try to perfect things over time. They don't throw the baby away with the bathwater. They see a problem, they tend to fix it over time. Now at the heart of the Prius, we look under the hood, different than most cars. It's got a hybrid synergy drive. It's got a gasoline engine in conjunction with electric batteries and a generator. And it's this system that makes it a good new car to buy, but a bad car to buy used with higher mileage. Now, as naughty as it sounds, they get better gas mileage in stop and go traffic in town than they do in a highway. They regenerate power. When the car is slowing down, it uses generators in the braking system to recharge the battery. And then when you take off, it uses the battery to help boost the power of the vehicle. Now, if you drive like a real snail, you can go a little distance here and there by just having it in electric mode. But as soon as you really step on the gas to take off, the gasoline engine will turn on. Now, the exception to this is the Prius Prime. It was a plug-in hybrid. You could run on electricity alone or use the engine, but really, the electricity, max it'd go would be about 25 miles. So it really was still just a hybrid gasoline electric. But in order to get this phenomenal gas mileage in town, the gasoline engine has to sync with the computers and the battery and the electric motor inside to make it run right. As you can see on the dash here, it tells you what's happening, how it's charging. There's various levels that you can check out on the displays. You can see here, there's all kinds of information that you can get. It's kind of wild. If you're really a tech person, you know, you're gonna have fun playing around with this stuff. Here we go. Here it's showing how it's charging, what it's working on. Needless to say, it's a very complex computer run operation. But in the case of this 2011, hey, it's had over 111,000 miles of pretty much trouble-free operation so far. But with a disclaimer here, up to today. Now it's got a problem with the regenerative braking system. That can end up costing a small fortune to fix. Purchasing a used one has over 100,000 miles on it, that can often be a big mistake. That's one reason they're so cheap to buy used. I had a customer a couple of years ago buy a used one with 140,000 miles on it for $1,500. They thought, what a deal, until the generator went out. Now on a normal car, like my old Celica, the alternator charges the battery. I can replace an alternator on one of these things for less than a couple $100. But not so on this Prius, because it doesn't have an alternator, it's got a generator. It's a generator motor. It generates electricity and it runs stuff. And to make things even more complicated, these Priuses are a combination of alternating electricity and direct electricity. They're very, very, very complex machines. They're not something a do-it-yourselfer or a corner guy at a gas station is going to be able to figure out when they have a serious problem with the drivetrain system. And in the case of my customer, the generator, which is hidden way inside here on the transmission transaxle assembly, went bad, and it was going to cost over $5,900 to replace it. Because of this cramped design, the engine and the transmission assembly has to be removed as a unit, and then you have to replace the generator assembly, transaxle, put it all back in. $5,900 for a car that the guy paid $1,500 for. Needless to say, he ended up junking the car. He didn't bother fixing it. But on a positive side, this thing had 150,000 miles on it or so, too. So it lasted a long time for the original owner. That's why if you're gonna buy one of these things, you buy it brand new. You don't buy a used one with higher mileage. Now, being a hybrid car, it's got a huge battery pack. You take all this crap out here, then you can see the battery pack. That's the side of it here. You notice this orange. When you see orange on this, that's the high voltage electricity. Normal cars have 12-volt batteries. You can stick your tongue on them, touch them, nothing's gonna happen. But these are over 200 volts. They can kill you. That is a particular turnoff when you pull on that switch, you can shut the power of the battery off. So if somebody's working on a car, they don't electrocute themselves. You notice under the hood, there's orange wires here. Same thing, it's warning you. That's the super high power. You don't mess with that stuff. You need serious electrician's equipment for that stuff. You gotta have inner gloves, and then you have to have outer gloves that are sealed. You gotta blow them out before you test them, see if they have leaks. If they have leaks, you throw them away and buy another set. And you have to have very expensive analytical gauges to work on these things. And if you were planning on testing these systems and working on them yourself, you'd have to buy all that equipment, the gloves and everything, but you'd also have to buy some very expensive gauges. You need very low testing equipment to test some of the circuits, and also very high for the 200 plus volt parts of the system. So you'd be spending thousands and thousands on tools. Really, it's dangerous stuff. I don't advise somebody messing around with it unless they have a lot of knowledge of electricity. Now, going back to the battery pack, they have a certain lifespan. They generally last quite some time. 10 years or more is not uncommon with these things. But when they do go bad, then you're in a real bizarre situation. Now, the last time I priced a battery for a car like this, a real brand new one from Toyota, was over $3,000. Now, of course, there's guys that refurbish them. Sometimes those cost as little as $1,100. Little, that's still a lot of money, but they're not all that dependable. Realize that the battery in this is actually a battery pack. It's a bunch of smaller batteries connected together. So when they go bad, some of those battery cells go bad, and there's all kinds of equipment. It analyzed it, would tell you which battery cells are bad, so which ones you'd have to take out and replace and solder back in. Even if that's done correctly, and that's a big if right there, but even if the bad ones are taken away, you still got half or more of the old ones in there that are old and wearing. So they never last as long as the original. I've had customers get 12, 13, 14 years out of the original Toyota battery. I've seen people put in those refurbished ones. Year and a half, 2 years later, they go bad and you're back to square one. Another reason I tell people, don't buy a high mileage used Prius. You're just gambling. But in their defense, for a new one, it may be small engines, but man, combined with the electric motor, they are very zippy little cars. They get up and go. Of course, originally they had the image of the eco people. And since the main driving force of this is the gasoline engine, it's an Atkinson cycle. It's a little different than a regular engine, but it's got spark plugs and air filter. You can maintain it yourself like any gasoline engine. Don't be scared away by the idea that it's an Atkinson cycle gasoline engine. That's just a design that started a long time ago, and it was never popular because even though it was more efficient and got better fuel mileage, it also had less power. So they were never popular until now, because when you add the gasoline engine with the battery pack and the electric motor running it, because even though this little Atkinson cycle engine only puts out 73 horsepower, the electric motor adds an additional 60 horsepower. So it almost doubles the power, and that's plenty of power combined to make this thing zip along. So in this case, when you want gas mileage on a highway, it's only running a 70 horsepower engine. But when you want to accelerate on a highway or accelerate in stop and go traffic, the electric motor adds an additional 60. So it almost doubles the horsepower. And if you know anything about electric motors, they have instant torque. So they're actually better for acceleration than gasoline engines. So when you need to accelerate, that electronic motor gives it a ton of boost. So they're zippy little cars that get great gas mileage. As you can see inside, they're comfy. They have cool designs. Look, there's no regular transmission, so there's a big hole there. And you go to the back seat, there's a decent amount of room in them. And even the trunk has good space because they put the battery mid there, so you still got a lot of room all around it for stuff. You see with their split rear window in the back, they got a top glass and bottom glass, so there's no blind spots. You can see quite well behind. Some of these cars, man, they got blind spots everywhere, but this is well made. They even got the little peek holes in the left and the right. So just like a Swiss watch, these things hum along quite well. But exactly the same as a Swiss watch, when they do break, you better start opening up your wallet, because they are not cheap vehicles to repair. I've never had a single customer buy a brand new Prius and not be happy with the vehicle. But I've had a whole bunch of them that bought them used and said, that's it, I'm never buying another one of these things. It cost a fortune to repair. Which is why I tell my own customers, when they're looking for used cars, you're buying a used car, don't buy a hybrid version. You want a Camry, get one with just a regular gasoline. Don't get a hybrid one. There's just so much complexity. They get older. They cost so much money to fix. And there's very few guys who actually know how to work on them correctly. Even more so than in normal cars, batteries go bad over time. Even if they're just sitting there. Sometimes if they're just sitting there, they go bad even faster. Maybe you find a 15-year-old Prius that's only got 60,000 miles on it. Still, it's probably not a good idea to buy one or pay much money for one, because that battery's probably going to go out pretty soon. And if somebody tries to sell you a used one and says, well, I just replaced the battery last year, hey, I'm assuming they replaced it with one of these refurbished batteries, and they generally go out after a year or 2 or 3. They're not going to last 10 years or more like the original one did. So if you are thinking about buying a used one, the battery has been replaced, get the paperwork for it to see what type of battery was put in. If it was a brand new Toyota one, perfectly fine. But if it's a refurbished one, nah, I'd look elsewhere myself. So now you know the truth about Toyota Priuses. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So you can make a wise decision. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.